In the ocean, far, far from shore, where the water is dark, dark blue, way, way, way down deep, where all kinds of fish swim about, and deeper still, where the delicate sea plants sway with the current in the deepest, deepest part of the ocean, was a big castle set on the ocean floor, and people lived in that big castle in the ocean. In this castle, there was a king who sat on his throne with his mother beside him. His mother wore a huge fancy crown, and she looked like the queen, but she wasn't the queen. She was the king's mother. The king had 6 daughters, 6 princesses who ranged from young to old. Of all the daughters, the youngest was the most beautiful. Everyone who saw her was impressed by her beauty. She truly was beautiful. The king's mother took care of the 6 princesses, and she taught them. They were all very different from the people who lived above the sea. For the bottom half of their bodies were like fish, and the top half of their bodies, they were human. They were called mermaids. The grandmother took care of the princesses, and they all lived in the huge castle together. Inside the castle, there were beautiful hallways with shiny floors, and when you opened the windows, the fish swim in and out around the house. It was not the same on land where birds would be afraid to go in someone's house. Here, in this castle, the fish go in the house, and when the family is eating, the fish would swim right up to them, and the mermaids would feed the fish. They were never scared to go in the house. They have a huge area to play in. When the 6 princesses would go outside, it would be beautiful as well. There would be green and red and all different colors about the ocean. And when the wind blew, the waves rippled and the sea plants swayed in the breeze. Each little princess had their own garden where they grew things. The oldest princess grew flowers, all different kinds of flowers. The next princess collected things that fell from shipwrecks. When things fell down from the wrecked ships, she set them in her room. Now, the littlest mermaid had a few things in her garden box. She had arranged beautiful flowers that looked like the sun. She set them in a circle, all the little red flowers. And sitting beside the flowers, she had a statue that she found from a shipwreck. She carried it from her garden and set it there. The statue was of a young boy. The little mermaid studied and studied the shape, and she saw that he was different from her. From the waist up, he looked the same. He had a very nice face. But when she looked from the waist down, he had 2 stumps. And she thought, that was very odd. She had a fishtail, But the boy, the statue, had two stumps. She asked her grandmother, and her grandmother explained, that up on the world, on land, people were very different from the mermaids in the ocean. Her grandmother explained that on land they had birds, and the little princess asked, "What's a bird?" The grandmother said, "Oh, well, they're like fish up on land, but these fish can sing." The princess was fascinated. She loved the story so much, so she asked her grandmother to tell the story again and again. Her grandmother also explained that on land they have lots of flowers, and that the flowers smell. The grandmother said, "Here, underwater, we have flowers, but they don't smell." And she continued to explain that on land that people talk, that there are horses, and there are towns, and animals and all kinds of things. The little mermaid listened, and she thought about how much she wanted to go and see the land. Really, all of the princesses wanted to go to the land, but the grandmother told them that they had to wait until they were 15 before they could go up, because they were too young. All the princesses thought to themselves, "Oh, I hope the time hurries. I hope it goes fast." The youngest princess had to wait the longest, and she was the one who wanted to go the most, so she really had to be the most patient and wait the longest. Finally, it was time for the oldest princess to go. She was the one to be the first, and she got all ready. She put on her makeup and was ready to swim. She swam and swam and swam towards the top, and finally her head broke the surface of the water, and she looked out to see a beautiful world. She swam back, and the other sisters asked, especially the youngest mermaid, what did she see? What was it like? She explained that she saw a beautiful beach with white sand, and that when she went up, there was a full moon, and the lights in the city were illuminated. She saw people in horse and buggies, and she saw everybody talking. She told them it was a fascinating and different world. The youngest mermaid asked her to tell her the story again and again. She was so jealous. She wanted to see for herself, but she had to wait. When the next princess turned 15, she went up, and when she came back, she explained what she saw as well. She said she saw the sunset, and she explained how the beautiful colors were, the orange and the red and the rays of the sun. She told how she tried to chase it, and how she swam and swam to chase it, but all of a sudden the sun was gone and it became dark. Her sisters looked at her in amazement. They couldn't believe that something could be so beautiful. The little mermaid said again that she wanted to go up and see the land so badly. Then it was time for the third princess to go up. She was the most daring of all. When she came back, she explained in the most intricate of details. She was so daring that she decided to go to the river and swim down the narrow inlet so that she could see the land up close. She saw children playing in the water and swimming and jumping around. And as her head broke the surface, she saw children looking at her as well. Then she saw an animal barking, and she was terrified and went back underwater. Then she broke the surface again, and she looked about and realized that what she saw was a dog. She saw the town and the cars. When she went back to her family, she explained what she had seen. Then it was time for the fourth princess to go. She was very, very shy, and she wouldn't go close to land. She stayed far back, and she saw tiny, tiny ships and tiny sailboats because she was so, so far away. She also saw the city and lights from very far away, and then she went right back down because she was so shy. And when she got back home, she explained everything that she saw. When the fifth princess turned 15, she went up. Now it just so happened that her birthday was in the winter time, so when she went up, she saw icebergs. She sat down on an iceberg and floated on the water. And it was freezing and the wind blew, and the water was rough, and the waves broke against the iceberg, and it rocked and bounced. When she went back home, she explained everything, and the little mermaid listened carefully to all her sisters and wanted to see the land so badly, but everyone told her that she had to be patient. Finally, it was her 15th birthday, and her grandmother prepared her with her makeup and clothes. And she had a beautiful headband made of white lilies and a beautiful dress. She was finally ready. She swam, and when her head broke the water surface, she saw the world. All that she had heard from her sisters had become reality. She saw a boat in the water, and she swam towards it. And she saw the sunset and the beautiful colors, the red and the purple. She looked from the sun to the boat, and she swam closer and closer to the sailboat when she saw the sails that were up go down. Then the boat stopped, and the people began to have a party. There was music, and as she swam closer, she could see more clearly. Suddenly, fireworks appeared, and the mermaid was so scared, she pulled her head below the water. After the fireworks had settled, she brought her head up above the surface, and she saw that the people were having a party. The party continued on the boat, and she saw that it was in honor of the prince. She looked at the prince, and he looked just like the statue in her garden by the castle underwater. She was fascinated. The people on the boat continued to celebrate, and she realized it was the boy's 15th birthday, the same as her own. As they celebrated throughout the night, the party finally ended, and they brought down the sails, and the ship started to move. The little mermaid swam after the boat. All of a sudden, big black clouds formed in the sky, and a storm approached. Everyone on the ship started yelling to pull the lines and pull the ropes, and the boat began rocking up and down. The little mermaid continued in her pursuit, when suddenly there was lightning and thunder, and it began to pour rain, and the wind blew as the boat rocked up and down amongst the huge waves. All of a sudden, the sails were destroyed as the mast fell, and the boat no longer had any control. The water began to pour into the boat, and as it did, the boat cracked in half and started to sink. All of the people on the boat jumped off quickly into the water. The little mermaid began looking all over for the prince, and she finally found him floating in the ocean. But he was much too tired to swim. The mermaid took hold of him and started swimming. Trying to bring him to the land. She swam, and as she swam with him in his arms, she fell in love. Finally, the wind died down, and the sea became calm. The next morning, as the sun rose, she continued to swim and finally reached the beach, where she laid the little prince down and kissed his forehead. The prince was unconscious, so he did not even know that she was there. The mermaid saw a school and saw a group of girls running from the school towards the beach. The little mermaid hid. When the girls saw the prince asleep on the beach, they ran over and looked at him. The mermaid laughed. She went back home. She was very sad because she wanted to be with the prince. And she was now separated from the world of the land and had to go back to her family. When she went back, all of her sisters asked her what had happened, but she barely explained what she had seen. She was so different from her other sisters who had talked and talked, and who had explained everything of the wonderful things they had seen. The youngest princess didn't want to talk about it at all. Her grandmother asked her, "What's the matter? Honey, what's wrong?" The little mermaid said, "Oh, nothing, nothing." And she held her feelings like this for a week. And every day she went back to the same beach to look. She continued to look for the prince, but she couldn't find him. Every day she went back to the same place and sat near the same rock and waited for the prince to come. But he never came. She became more and more depressed. Her sister asked, "What's the matter?" And finally, the little mermaid explained of how she carried the prince to the shore. That sister told the other sisters, and one of the other sisters said, "I know where he lives. Do you want me to bring you there?" The little mermaid said, "Yes, please show me." The two swam to the top of the water and saw the huge castle with the drawbridge. The sisters told the little mermaid, "That's where he lives." So, every day, the little mermaid looked for the prince. Finally, she saw him and watched him for hours on end. Every day she went and she thought, how could she contact him? One day, she noticed a boat, and on the boat the men were fishing. She heard them talking about how wonderful the prince was, and how he was such a good boy. The little mermaid's heart fluttered even more. She thought more and more about how she could meet him. When she went back to the world, she asked her grandmother, "How do the people on the land meet other people? How do they fall in love? If I brought him here, would he die?" Her grandmother explained, "It's very different on land. People who live on land live only a short life. And when they die, they have a spirit inside their body that allows them to live forever." For us mermaids, the situation is different. We live for 300 years. But when we die, we become foam in the ocean. We don't have a spirit like the people on the land. Instead, we disintegrate into the ocean. The little mermaid said, "But I want to be with the prince." "Well, that's very hard. The only way that you could is to join him. You'd have to meet him, and the prince would have to see you, and fall in love with you, and you would have to love him. And that love would join your spirits together, and you could become as one and live with him," said the grandmother. The little princess said, "Well, that's what I want. I want to live with the prince." "I'm sorry, you can't," said the grandmother. The grandmother explained, "People on land have legs. They walk. We don't have that. You have a tail. You can't walk like people on the land." The little princess said, "Well, what am I going to do? I want to be with the prince." The grandmother said, "I'm sorry, you can't." The little mermaid was so depressed. She would do anything for the prince to love her so she could share his spirit and they could live together. She thought and she thought. And one day she had an idea. She knew she had to see the sea witch who lived amongst the eels and octopus. She knew she had to meet her. For if she met the sea witch, she knew that she could help her. So finally, after she thought a great deal, she decided to go. One evening, when her family was having a party, she secretly snuck out and swam to where the sea witch lived. The sea witch lived in the maelstrom, and in order to get there, you had to be very careful, for the water whirled and whirled about, and it was very hard to swim. And when you got near there were all kinds of strange fish, eel and octopus, with long tentacles that could grab onto your body. But the princess continued. She finally arrived at the witch. "I know why you're here to see me," said the witch. "Yes, I want to be with the prince forever," said the little mermaid. The witch continued. "Well, you have to understand that the boy must love you more than he loves his own parents, and he really must love you. And if that happens, you will get his love forever. The second thing is, I will give you a potion," continued the witch. "You drink that potion when you reach the land, and as you drink it, your tail will become legs." The little mermaid looked with great fascination. The witch continued, "Every step that you take, it will feel as if there are knives in your feet, and you will suffer a great deal. It will be very painful. And because you have such a beautiful voice," said the witch, "I will have to take that from you. You will never be able to speak." The mermaid reluctantly accepted everything the witch had said. So the witch prepared the special potion. And took the girl's voice so she could no longer speak. The little mermaid swam away with the potion, and as she thought that she wouldn't be able to speak with her family, she swam up to the surface and decided to approach the beach. When she arrived, she sat down and waited until the next morning to drink the magic potion. She felt such pain as her tail split and became 2 legs. And as she looked down and saw her new legs, she was happy. Finally, she fell asleep on the beach and slept all morning. It so happened that the prince was walking along the beach and noticed the mermaid laying on the sand and carried her into his castle. They looked at each other and looked into each other's eyes. And the mermaid thought, "Oh, I want to be with the prince so badly." The prince talked to the little mermaid, but she couldn't talk back. She had no voice and couldn't answer him. So she began to gesture. The prince, unfortunately, couldn't understand what was wrong. He thought, well, she must be sick. So he decided that he would take care of her and give her clothes because she didn't have any. He gave her the most beautiful clothes, and she had beautiful legs and walked so daintily. But with each step, it felt like knives were going through her feet. She withstood the pain, and when she saw the prince's family eating, she went to join them. They all ate together, and she sat there in silence, because unfortunately she couldn't speak. When everyone was finished eating, they had a dance, and the little mermaid sat there and wished she could join. Finally, she did. She was an incredible dancer. She was graceful, she did pirouettes, and danced the whole night, even though the pain was ever so great. She didn't have a voice, but she expressed herself through dancing. Everyone watched in awe. The prince and the mermaid felt even closer, and they spent the entire evening together. The prince wanted the girl to sleep right outside of his room, on a little pillow. She was the only one ever permitted to do that. They felt so close to each other. The mermaid thought, "We're so close, maybe he will love me. And we'll be together forever. That was her dream. The prince took her everywhere and visited all the people of the kingdom on horseback. And though she bounced around on the horse's back, she learned. They became even closer. The prince told her how much he loved her, and the mermaid was so excited. But because she couldn't talk, she couldn't express how she felt. But they still spent all their time together. One day, the prince's father announced that in the kingdom nearby, there was a daughter of a king there, whom he would marry. So the king arranged for the prince and the daughter to meet. The mermaid was shocked. The prince said, "Don't worry, we'll meet, but inside of me, I still dream of that girl, the girl I saw on the beach when I almost drowned. I would like to be able to meet that girl someday, but I haven't seen her again. I've searched long and far, and though you look a little like her, I still haven't met her." The mermaid thought to herself, "Perhaps he'll recognize me." He looked at her and thought, "I still dream of her. She wanted to tell him it was her." And he continued to look at her, but never could remember. They spent all their time together. One day, the prince's father announced that in the kingdom nearby, there was a daughter who was ready to marry, and that the family wanted the prince to meet the daughter. The prince said, "Fine," and the mermaid was concerned. The prince told her, "Don't worry. I'm sure it's nothing. But you can join me." So the two of them got in the boat, and as they went to the house of the nearby kingdom, the prince warned the mermaid, "The water is very dangerous. You have to be very careful." The prince explained how dangerous the water could be, and the mermaid, of course, knew, but just sat and nodded. She knew, of course, because she had lived in the ocean once before. When the boat arrived at the huge kingdom, they got out and walked into this beautiful castle with a drawbridge. There they saw a celebration, and they looked for the girl who the prince was to marry, but she hadn't yet arrived. She was still training to become a queen. There was a special school for queens, so she was not yet ready. Later that evening, after the banquet, the mermaid sat with the prince when the girl arrived. As she walked into the room, the mermaid looked and realized that it was that girl that she saw from the school when the prince was lying on the beach unconscious. That was the girl who first noticed the prince. When the prince saw her, he was so excited. He realized she was the girl in his dream when he was unconscious on the beach. The little mermaid's heart was broken. The prince was so happy, and he told her, "I'm so very happy. That's the girl in my dream." The prince and the princess joined together, and the little mermaid was devastated. She realized that her life with the prince and joining with his soul would be gone forever. And at the same time, she was very happy for the prince, for that she knew he would be in love with the new princess. They planned the wedding, and it was a huge celebration. And the prince did not dismiss the mermaid, of course, because he wanted her to be part of the wedding celebration with his new bride. The little mermaid remembered what the witch had told her, and that if she did not marry the prince, she would die and become part of the ocean. The little mermaid had to accept that because she knew the prince was going to marry the girl. And after the wedding, the three of them got back in the boat, the prince, his wife, and the little mermaid. As they sailed home, the little mermaid thought, "Any time now I'll be gone." Suddenly in the water, she noticed her sister waving to her. Her sister explained that the little mermaid could save herself. Her sister said that she had met the witch, and the witch had told her that if the little mermaid stabbed the prince and killed him, her life would go on, and she would go back to being a mermaid. The sister begged her to do this, to please save her life, and she gave the little mermaid a special dagger. The little mermaid took it, and her sister went back underwater. That evening, the little mermaid held the knife as she walked into the prince's bedroom on the boat. The prince was asleep, and as she picked up the knife to stab him, she realized she could not kill him. She loved him too much. She threw down the knife and left the room. The boat continued to sail, and as the little mermaid looked into the stars in the sky and down at the water, she began to feel dizzy and sick. The little mermaid threw herself into the water and floundered and floated about, and knew she was ready to die. But she was still alive. Suddenly, her body transformed into air bubbles and began to drift into the wind. She floated to join the other air bubbles as they danced in the breeze. She danced gleefully to the tune of the wind, as if she was enjoying every single moment. Then she asked one of the air bubbles how she got there, and as they floated, the air bubble explained, "Your life will continue for 300 years. And after that, the wind will carry you to heaven to join God's kingdom. That is where you belong, because you are a wonderful mermaid. You knew how to give love, and you would not kill. In return for your goodness, you will continue to float and dance everywhere with the wind." Today, when you stand on the beach, looking out at the ocean and feeling the sea breeze, remember that is the eternal wind of the Little Mermaid.